Welcome to Mission Majjhima, Ajahn.
Ajahn.
So tell us about Majjhima number 48, the Kosambiya Sutta.
I love this discourse. So, begins with monks arguing, which monks sometimes do, and it's reported to the Buddha, and he summons those disputing monks in his name and asks them, is it true that you are arguing, stabbing each other with verbal daggers, mukasati, which is a great term? And they say, yes, Lord. And I think it's beautiful to note that the Buddha never just takes that third person report as true necessarily initially. He always asks for confirmation. And then he goes on to say, this will be for your long-term pain and suffering, and you're not giving attention to loving kindness towards your fellows, your companions in the spiritual life. And then goes on to outline the 6 conditions for amicability, for harmony. And he begins by saying, 1 maintains acts of loving kindness by body towards one's companions in the holy life, both in public and private. One maintains, number 2 is one maintains acts of loving kindness by speech towards one's companions in the holy life, both in public and private. Acts of loving kindness in mind, public and private, which is a little interesting. Then whatever gains one has gotten in a righteous way, one does not partake of them without first having shared with one's spiritual companions. One dwells with virtue, sila, in harmony, that is untorn, unspotted, unsplattered, in harmony with one's companions in the holy life. And finally, one has shared right view that is transcendent, leading onwards towards liberation. And this is the kingpin, the roof beam. The apex is right view, shared right view. And then he goes on to outline these 7 fascinating, what we can call the review knowledges for one of right view. And really, I've heard these talked about as the stream enterer review knowledges. For this is a level of right view that, I think we can just notice it in our daily lives, but also the sense that if one really has these, then this is how one would review as to whether one had attained the first level of enlightenment, at least sotapanna, stream entry. And to note that, rather than pointing to a single experience and trying to say this is stream entry, the Buddha here is saying it's more reliable to look at the effects of an experience like that, like review after the fact. Are these qualities present in you? And that is a way of, becoming sure of, or that is the way to look at this attainment, is the long-term effect. And then the 7 factors are one's mind. One reviews one's mind is unsubjugated by the hindrances, by thoughts of this world, the other world, by anger. And then one is noticing that when they pursue and cultivate that view, it leads to tranquility, to unbinding. One reviews if there are recluses in other traditions who share this view. Then one reviews, do I have the character of one with right view? And just as an infant would draw its hand or foot away from a burning fire, even so, when one has transgressed a precept of virtue laid down by the Blessed One, one immediately confesses it to a companion in the holy life, which is such a beautiful way of thinking about how the mind begins to recoil from non-virtue, just deeply and immediately. And then the next is that even as a cow would always keep an eye on their calf, even as they grazed, though one attends to one's duties, one maintains awareness and respect for training and heightened virtue, heightened mind, and heightened wisdom, which is just such a beautiful image of how a cow would always be aware of their calf. And even so, we always, even when we're in the midst of daily activities, always thinking of the path in the back of our minds, at least. And then finally, the Buddha talks about these 2 aspects of the strength of one, of right view, and that when the Dharma is being taught, one lends ear and takes joy in the Dhamma. And I love that idea that our strength as practitioners is our love of listening to the Dhamma. That is so cool. So I really appreciate this discourse a lot. Ajahn, what would you draw out of this sutta?
One thing is we really encourage everybody to memorize these 6 bases for what Bhikkhu Bodhi translates as cordiality, the saraniya dhammas. Saraniya also can be translated as to be remembered. You should remember these 6 qualities because they lead to this harmony, this mutual feeling of affection and mutual respect. You've already named them, but behaving with bodily acts of loving kindness in private and in public. One does that with verbal acts, both in public and in private. So the privacy there is, if you're talking to one group of people, behind someone's back, you say nice things. You have this these acts of loving kindness, even when you're speaking to the person and behind their backs. And as you pointed out, this one of mind, what does it mean to perform mental acts of loving kindness in private and in public? And one way of understanding that is that, even when I'm not with you, say, when you first wake up in the morning, you prime yourself. I'm going to see these people today, or these are the people in my life who I care about. And I would like to have loving kindness. I do have loving kindness. I have metta for these people. So even though I'm by myself, I'm in private, I think thoughts of loving kindness towards people. And when I'm with them in person, I also have thoughts of loving kindness with them. The next one is that one shares what one has with other people. And one, for monastics, the Buddha this includes the contents of one's alms bowl. So as monastics, we're people who are training in having very few material objects, but who have hopefully a lot of mental well-being. One of the few possessions that we have each day, the primary central gratification that we have, is the food that we eat each day on alms round. And one is willing to share even the contents of one's alms bowl with others. And this is the basis for what in Sri Lanka is called the saraniya practice, which is the Dhamma which is to be remembered, or that which leads to cordiality of before one eats, you give something away, remembering that, as the Buddha said, if being knew as I knew the results of giving and sharing, they wouldn't eat without first having given. So to here, you can practice giving something away. If it's to a family member, you serve your husband or your wife or your child or whatever first. Or if you have a pet, feed your pet first. Or if you've even just compost, give to the beings in your compost before you eat. And then keeping precepts the same as your friends. And then, as you said, having this right view, which is emancipating and really valuing that. And this leads to communal harmony. These are things which are to be remembered. Ajahn, what would you like to draw out of this sutta?
I think one of the things you pointed to, this word in public and in private, raho, is really significant with, say, even bodily acts. Like when you have a picture on your shrine of a teacher, like, can you, make sure to clean it off once a week at least? Can you be careful when you're lifting up the picture and putting it down? People you live with, can you fold the laundry when you're taking it out of the dryer rather than just throwing in the basket? These acts of loving kindness you can by body, even when you're not with them. And like you're pointing to, just the acts of loving kindness by mind in private, away from them. Like when you find yourself going over the same argument or narrative about someone on your own, just to remember the Buddha said, no, like with people we love, remember, and all people, but even when alone, don't let that narrative go in the mind, like acts of loving kindness, even when you're alone. With giving, I love how you pointed to, always giving what you've gained with someone, a companion. And I love how the Buddha says one does not partake without first having given, as you were saying. So this real, clear direction, whenever you get something new, before you partake of it, offer some of it to a companion. And that little act of relinquishment, even if it takes a little bit of a little bit of the cake, give away a little bit of this before you partake of it, is one of the most powerful practices I know about. And the final thing I'd just note is when the Buddha says right view is the roof beam, the kingpin, one thing to note is the kind of supports of a roof aren't stable until that final beam is in place. It stabilizes all the others. And I think that's why so many, communes failed in the 70s and 60s, is this lack of a shared direction, a shared element of right view. And that even if you're keeping those first 5 are really trying to, if there's not a clear trajectory for a community of people, then there's not that stabilizing direction. It's like riding a bike. You need that movement for it to stabilize the whole community on one purpose. And so the fact that that's the roof beam that stabilizes all the others, I think is worth noting.
So Ajahn, what is the word of the week?
The word of the week is mukasati, which means daggers of the mouth. And it comes from muka, which is mouth, and sati, which is sword. And it's a great word just to remember when we're doing daggers of the mouth. So.
Yeah, scary. Well, please avoid the daggers of the mouth for the next week.